Wind howled across the prairie, flattening the brittle grass and lashing dust against the hide of a lone rider moving through the gray dusk. The clouds above were swollen and bruised, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. Caleb Walker rode, headlong into it, unmoved by the storm, the chill or the emptiness stretching around him. His coat flapped behind him, oilskin slick with rain and trail dust. The years had carved lines deep into his face, a map of grief and long silence. His eyes, pale and clear as glacial water, scanned the horizon without hope, only endurance. As he approached the outskirts of Red Bluff, he slowed. The town was as he remembered, leaning buildings stitched together with rusted nails and stubbornness. A hanging sign creaked above the saloon, and the streets were mud from the day's earlier storm. He dismounted in front of the general store, ignoring the wary eyes of loitering men. Then he heard it, laughter, jeers, the sharp cry of a girl. He turned toward the sound. A crowd had gathered just beyond the livery, men circling like dogs. At the center stood a woman, middle-aged and drunk, her hair falling in greasy ropes. She clutched a dirty bottle and waved it like a trophy. Beside her, a girl, no more than 17, stood barefoot in the mud, her dress torn and clinging to a belly swollen with child. Her face was empty, her eyes far away, fixed on nothing. "She's healthy," the woman shouted. "Strong womb, quiet mouth, got her from good stock." A laugh rippled through the men, but Caleb didn't hear it. He only saw the girl, Rosalie, standing, as if she'd already vanished from the world. There was no fight in her, no protest, just a kind of surrender that struck Caleb like a bullet to the ribs. One of the men stepped forward, pulling coins from his vest. Caleb moved before he could think. In seconds, he was between them, hand on his belt buckle where the butt of his Colt rested. "I'll take her," Caleb said. The woman blinked. "You? Ain't seen you in years, Caleb Walker." He didn't answer. He held up a few silver dollars, enough for a cow, not a person. But the woman grabbed them, already turning to swig from her bottle. "Suit yourself," she slurred. The girl didn't react when Caleb gently took her arm. She stumbled once but let him lead her. The crowd parted, murmuring. Caleb didn't look back. They rode out of town that night, the wind biting sharper. As it followed them west into the hills, Rosalie said nothing, didn't cry, didn't speak. She rode behind Caleb on his mule, her arms loosely wrapped around his waist, not from trust but because she lacked the strength to sit upright alone. By the time the sun rose, the sky was already darkening again. The land stretched endless and raw, pine ridges clawing the edge of the world. They rode through shallow rivers, over rocky bluffs, past broken trees charred by old lightning. Caleb didn't try to speak to her. He had nothing kind to say, and no use for empty words. That afternoon, a sharp wind shifted and rain began to fall hard and fast. The horses spooked on a narrow pass and Rosalie's head lolled forward. Caleb reined them in and turned. Her skin was ashen, drenched in sweat, her breaths shallow. He cursed under his breath, slipped from his saddle and caught her before she could fall. She was burning up. Fever. He carried her up a hill into the shelter of a narrow cave he'd used before. The earth was dry inside, the ceiling low, the floor soft with moss. He laid her gently down, covering her with his coat, then built a fire using flint and the dry twigs stored in an old canvas pouch. Rain clattered at the cave mouth as the shadows deepened. She moaned in her sleep, shifting. Caleb touched her forehead. It was scorching. He pulled a flask from his saddlebag and coaxed a few sips of water between her lips. She didn't wake. He sat beside her, staring at the fire, the dance of orange light flickering across her hollow cheeks. His hand trembled slightly as he took out a folded letter, corners softened by time. "My darling Caleb, if you find this, I've already gone. I hope the land has been kinder to you than I could be." His wife had written it before she died in childbirth, alone. He'd found her in their burned-out cabin, holding the lifeless baby wrapped in a quilt she'd stitched herself. Caleb tucked the letter away. He watched Rosalie breathe. She reminded him of ghosts, fragile, waiting to vanish. The night deepened. Far off, coyotes howled. thin, hungry cries that echoed through the valley. Caleb stood and loaded his rifle, stepping just outside the cave entrance. Rain soaked his hat, his coat, the barrel of the gun. Yellow eyes glinted in the dark. 3, maybe 4 shadows weaving between rocks. Coyotes. He fired once into the air and they scattered but didn't run far. He stayed there, posted like a sentinel, until the wind shifted and the howls faded. When he returned, Rosalie was still unconscious, but her breathing was stronger. At dawn, the storm broke. A soft pink light cracked over the horizon. The wind had gentled. Birds sang hesitantly, unsure if the storm was truly gone. Caleb looked down at the girl curled beside the embers, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd seen her. He didn't know if she'd ever speak to him, if she'd survive the coming days, if she'd hate him for buying her, or thank him for saving her. He didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but something, and it was enough to ride toward. The ranch stood in the shadow of the butte, half buried in wind-blown earth and memory. The fence leaned where storms had taken their toll, and the barn door swung on one hinge, groaning in protest. But the roof held, the chimney still breathed smoke. And in that quiet morning haze, Caleb led Rosalie up the cracked stone steps of the cabin. She held onto his arm, but didn't speak. Her steps were small, shaky. Fever had taken weight from her already thin frame, but something in her eyes was different. No longer the blank, detached stare from the auction block. She looked, if only faintly present. Inside, the air smelled of dust and pine sap. Caleb had kept the place livable, though barely. A rusted stove, a bed of straw and wool, shelves lined with jars of preserves long expired. He pointed to the bed, and she sat slowly. Her hand touched the faded quilt like it was something precious. The next morning, Rosalie tried to rise before him. He found her outside in the morning chill, kneeling by the chicken coop, scattering feed with clumsy fingers. She nearly collapsed, but waved him off when he moved to help. "I can work," she said quietly. He didn't answer, just handed her a basket for eggs. Later that day, she helped milk the goat. Her grip was weak and she winced when the goat shifted, but she didn't quit. Caleb watched from the doorway, arms crossed. He didn't praise her. He didn't have to. The fact that she was trying was enough. The next week, Caleb rode into town for supplies. Red Bluff hadn't softened in his absence. The general store still stank of stale tobacco, and the same sour-faced men loitered outside the saloon. As he walked past, whispers followed him like gnats. Old man bought himself a girl, knocked her up maybe? Hell, she's just a kid. Caleb ignored them, jaw tight. Inside, he picked up flour, salt, new boots for her. The shopkeeper hesitated before taking his money. On his way out, Sheriff Tilson intercepted him. A tall man with a gut made of whiskey and self-importance. "You know the law don't look kindly on what you did, Caleb." "I didn't break no law." Tilson narrowed his eyes. "Didn't say you did. Just saying, don't stir up trouble. Town don't need it." Caleb didn't reply. He rode out with his supplies and didn't look back. But the eyes followed. That night the wind picked up again, rustling dry branches against the cabin. Caleb stepped outside before dawn to check the coop and found something odd. A bundle wrapped in deerskin placed neatly by the gate. Inside it, fresh rabbit meat and a bundle of dried herbs. He scanned the horizon. Nothing but prairie. But when he knelt, he saw the tracks. Light. Small. Moccasins. The next evening, Caleb was repairing a fence post when he heard the soft crunch of footsteps. He turned slowly. A man stood at the edge of the trees, tall, silent, wrapped in buckskin and shadows. His face was lined, proud, and unreadable. "Been a long time," the man said. "Wicasa," Caleb said after a pause. They'd met years ago, briefly, during a skirmish-turned bloodbath. Caleb had pulled Wicasa from a burning wagon, not expecting to see him again. "The girl," Wicasa said, nodding toward the house. "Her spirit is broken. If she is to live, She must choose it. Then he turned and walked away, leaving no sound behind but the whisper of grass. That night, Rosalie cried. It began as a silent tremble at dinner when Caleb mentioned the crib he'd once built, untouched, stored in the attic. She dropped her spoon, hugged herself tightly, and said through clenched teeth, "Don't talk about babies." He didn't push. Later, as he tended the fire, she finally broke. It wasn't my choice," she said, barely louder than the crackling flame. Caleb didn't ask who. He didn't want to know. He stood, crossed the room, and opened a cedar chest. From it, he pulled a wool shawl, faded red, stitched by his late wife's hands. He held it out to Rosalie. She took it with shaking fingers. He didn't speak again that night. When sleep finally took him, it was cruel. He saw flames devouring the old cabin, heard screaming, his wife's, his child's, maybe his own. The dreams always ended the same. Ash in his mouth, his hands too late. He woke before dawn, breath ragged, sweat cold on his brow. Rosalie sat nearby, holding the shawl tightly around her shoulders. She didn't ask what haunted him. They never needed to speak of it. The days that followed were quieter. A rhythm settled in. Caleb taught her how to tend the goats properly, how to load the rifle, how to fix a jam. She listened, learned fast. Her hands grew steadier. Wikasa returned once without warning. He left a bundle of herbs for the girl, then helped Caleb dig new fence holes before vanishing again. "He speaks in riddles," Rosalie said one night. Caleb half smiled. "He always has." That night, the sky turned the color of steel. Smoke rose on the northern horizon the next day. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Caleb stood on the ridge, jaw clenched. "Bandits," he muttered. They'd been tearing through nearby farms. He'd heard the rumors. Families murdered, women taken. He spent that evening boarding up the windows, reinforcing the door with crossbars and bolts. He handed Rosalie a shotgun, watched her fingers tighten around the grip. "You pull, you don't hesitate," he told her. She didn't flinch, just nodded. Wikasa came one last time before the tension broke. He stood at the edge of the trees, watching the house like a sentinel. Then he turned and walked away. But this time, he looked back once. The moon hung low and yellow, casting a sickly glow over the prairie. Inside the cabin, Caleb loaded the last round into his rifle, sweat dripping down his temple despite the cold. The wind had gone still, too still. Rosalie sat by the door, hands clenched tight around the shotgun. Her knuckles had turned white, lips parted in shallow breaths. Then the silence broke. Hooves thundered in the distance. Shadows flickered across the land. 4, 5 riders, masked and wild, galloping toward the ranch like wraiths from a nightmare. "Get down," Caleb muttered. The first shot shattered the window. Glass exploded. Caleb fired back, dropped one man off his horse. Another circled wide, tossing a torch onto the roof. Flames caught on dry shingles. Caleb cursed, turned to stop it, but pain burst through his side like lightning. A bullet tore into him. He stumbled, fell hard on the floor, coughing blood. Rosalie screamed. The riders dismounted, hooting, closing in like vultures. One shoved the door. Rosalie shook, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. But then, she moved. She stood, aimed the shotgun at the door, and fired. The blast hit the wall inches from a bandit's face. He screamed and fled. Another charged forward, and then, from the shadows, a figure moved like smoke, Wikasa. He emerged without a word, knife in hand. In one fluid motion, he pulled a man from his saddle and ended him. Another turned to shoot. Too late. Wikasa vanished behind the smoke, and the man fell, throat slit. The last rider panicked, kicked his horse into a gallop, and vanished into the darkness. It was over in minutes. Rosalie dropped the shotgun and rushed to Caleb. He was pale, blood soaking through his shirt. "No, no, no," she whispered, ripping open his shirt, fumbling with cloth and trembling fingers. "Don't you die. Don't you dare die. You're the only man who never hurt me. His eyes fluttered, barely conscious, but he nodded once. She found a sewing kit, boiled water, did what she could. Her hands shook the entire time, but the stitches held. For the next 2 days, he barely moved. Fever racked him. Wicasa helped bring herbs, spoke little, and then the storm returned, lashing winds and thunder that shook the walls. Rosalie screamed as her water broke. Pain ripped through her, worse than she ever imagined. Caleb tried to rise, fell back with a groan. Wicasa stepped forward. He lit the fire, boiled water, placed warm stones near her feet. His voice was soft, instructive. Rosalie gritted her teeth and followed. Lightning cracked, she screamed, and he held her hand. Hours passed, and then, a cry. High and thin, cutting through the storm. A boy. Wicasa swaddled him in Caleb's old flannel shirt. Rosalie wept, exhausted and shaking, clutching the tiny bundle. Jacob, she whispered. After your father. Caleb smiled faintly. He would have liked that. Days passed. The storm gave way to sun. Caleb sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the baby in his arms. The sunrise spilled gold across the hills. He's not mine, Caleb said, but he's ours. Rosalie stood beside him. She didn't speak, just leaned her head against his shoulder. Not as a lover, but as something stronger. Family. Trust. Wicasa stood by his horse, silent as ever. He nodded once, then mounted up and rode away, vanishing into the horizon like a ghost. In the distance, the land whispered. Vio, in the wilderness, broken things don't stay broken. They become something new. Fade to black. Text on screen. True stories of resilience still ride these lands. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more frontier tales of survival, redemption, and unexpected bonds.